doesn't love a great sequel? I mean, we get so many of them these days. I mean, way too many. Sometimes you get a sequel and you absolutely love it because sequels are necessary at times to continue stories that we love. Other times they're money grabs made by studios that just want to make a quick buck off the success of what was originally a standalone movie. But sometimes in a weird way in this modern Hollywood, you get really great movies that leave an opening for the story to be continued, and then it never gets continued. Now, this could be for a couple reasons. The financial success of the first movie, maybe it bombed and we just never got a sequel because there's no profit in it. Maybe they couldn't find a filmmaker attached, or maybe just there's nothing. There's no reason why they haven't made one. It just hasn't happened yet. For today's video, I'm going to break down 15 movies that I want to see sequels to. These are 15 sequels that I personally, Joe Marchione, want to see made in the coming decade. Some of these movies are personal picks. Some of these are widely talked about movies that need a sequel, and some of them are just kind of fun. A few of these movies are definitely not going to happen. I just want to point that out now, but I will talk as I go through each one and explain which ones I think are most likely to happen and which ones are definitely not going to happen. You know how these videos work. Before I jump into it, please make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. I upload every single day, so please come back after this video for tomorrow's video. All right, let's jump right in. And number 15 is Tropic Thunder 2. Yeah, we're starting off hot, man. Now, obviously, this movie's never going to be made because Tropic Thunder is one of the most controversial movies in the history of Hollywood. Was it controversial at the time? Not really, but it's a movie that definitely does not exist in woke, modern day social justice warriors sort of culture that we've built. Tropic Thunder is a brilliant film if you've never seen it. It stars Ben Stiller, and it also stars Robert Downey Jr. and a bunch of other people, and it's essentially a movie about the filming of this movie, this Vietnam-esque war movie, and shit just goes wrong, and the movie is this extremely meta, sarcastic, a commentary on a bunch of different stuff in Hollywood and just the world in general. The movie is so outlandish and so outrageous. Robert Downey Jr. is incredible in the film. He's playing a blackface character, but that's the point. The point is that it's bad. He's playing the dude disguised as the dude playing another dude. What a movie. Goddamn. This is a movie that if they actually made it, it would be a huge success. This movie would be a financial slam dunk because I think people would just be interested to see how they could have topped the first one. There's also a chance that if you make a sequel that they, do the whole SJW cancel culture bullshit and just make the movie really, really bad. That's probably what would happen. But man, oh man, does Hollywood and does the world, do we really need a movie like this? A movie that just does not give a fuck. And it just goes all in with its craziness, its jokes, and just the insanity. Tropic Thunder 2. Why not? Let's get it made, guys. Number 14 is Ready Player 2. Steven Spielberg actually came out recently and said that this movie is going to happen at some point, that it is in development, that he would not be directing it, which I'll get to in a second, but that it will probably be happening. Now, Ready Player 1 is a movie that was directed by Steven Spielberg based off a novel. It came out back in 2018. It stars Ty Sheridan and Olivia Cooke. It also has Mark Rylance in it, and it's just brilliant, underrated gem of a movie that takes place in a futuristic world in which pretty much all of humanity lives in the meta world. They live in this VR existence, this massive video game that has just become a virtual world, and people live there because our regular world is just kind of miserable. And through this world, it's just flashy, full of Easter eggs. You can kill people, there's battles, there's races, there's a big treasure hunt quest, and it is just an incredible movie that does tell a full story and kind of comes to a conclusion. But there is a sequel book. I never read it. I don't know what it's like, but what I do know is that this world is so rich and so interesting and so fascinating, and that first movie was such an underrated hit, a movie that I absolutely love, one of Spielberg's best recent films, that I would love to see that universe come back and have hopefully Spielberg dive back in and bring a sequel to life. Now, knowing that Spielberg is not involved, I hope that they get a visionary director. I hope they get somebody who has a history of delivering on films like this, and they don't just get a random no-name director to make shit out of something glorious. But Ready Player 2 would be something that I really want to see. Hopefully, it actually happens. Next up is The World's End 2. Now, this is one I'm a little skeptical on. Now, obviously, The World's End is an Edgar Wright movie, and it's actually technically a trilogy ender, the Cornetto trilogy, a trilogy of films that are unconnected. Of course, you have Shaun of the Dead, you have Hot Fuzz, and you have The World's End. And the Cornetto trilogy are 3 movies that were directed by Edgar Wright that star Simon Pegg and Nick Frost as this kind of acting duo. Each movie is very different, but they are thematically very similar, and they kind of connect as this weird kind of interconnecting world, all directed by Edgar Wright. Now, The World's End, although the last one, is arguably the best one. It's one of my favorite movies movies. I think it is an incredible movie about this group of friends who are bar hopping this town. It's been decades since the last time they attempted to do it. Now they're going to try to do this large bar hop, and when they go to try to do it, weird shit happens. There's aliens, there's cybernetic robots and shit, there's just absolute craziness, and there's a really good story here. But the thing about this movie is the movie does end on a cliffhanger. The movie promises a brand new world, kind of, at the end of the movie. There's something very interesting that I don't want to spoil in case you haven't seen the movie, but it kind of bleeds into what could be a very, very different sequel. And I don't think Edgar Wright has ever made a sequel, and I don't know what an Edgar Wright sequel would look like, but if he was going to do one, this would be it. Because the world changes enough by the end of the first movie that you could do a sequel that is extraordinarily different than the original movie. It would be a completely different, film tonally, visually. It would just be a completely new thing, just continuing with these characters, and that, to me, would be interesting. I know there were some conversations with Edgar Wright in the past. There were some articles written that he talked about potentially doing a sequel to this, but he also was skeptical and kind of hesitant to make a fourth movie in this Cornetto trilogy, that it just kind of, it's nicely fit as 3 movies, and he might keep it that way. But I'd love to see it. Next up is Chronicle, which I cannot believe is now 12 years old. That is ridiculous. I felt like this movie just came out. Chronicle is directed by Josh Trank, and he is probably the main reason a sequel to this movie hasn't happened, because Josh Trank has had a lot of troubles in Hollywood, a lot of problems. Apparently he's a dick. I don't know, I've never met the man, but he did make Fat Four Stick, and we all know about Fat Four Stick, don't we? But Chronicle is a movie that stars Dane DeHaan and Michael B. Jordan. It's about this group of friends who kind of become superheroes. They get these superpowers, and they just explore what it means to be like a teenager who's just come across these powers in a real world. It's a found footage movie that's more of a sci-fi thriller than like a horror thing, which is typical for this genre. The movie has great characters. The movie has a great visual style to it. A lot of the way they actually incorporate the superpowers is kind of creepy, but also very different than anything else you get in superhero movies today. It's just a very interesting movie that did a lot of things right, and I felt like a sequel that really honed in what they were exploring in this first movie and kind of made a better version of this. It didn't have to be a direct sequel, a story sequel. It could have just been a follow-up in this world. I think it could be very, very interesting, and there were plans. There were multiple plans. The last thing I heard, like about a year ago, there was an article written that there's still a movie in production in the Chronicle universe, and then I don't know if Josh Trank is attached. There are rumors about there being an all-female version of it, which would be interesting. All I know is that this is an interesting world. It's a great, great movie that not enough people talk about anymore, and it's something that definitely, I think, could use a sequel. I think a sequel could be fascinating. This is one I actually think is probably going to happen at some point. There's just been too much smoke when it comes to rumors about productions and people talking about this movie. It's probably going to happen. Maybe without Josh Trank, because Fan Four Stick. What a shit show.
That is one big pile of shit.
Next is Big Hero 6. How is there not a sequel to Big Hero 6? I mean, what? This is like the forgotten, perfect, amazing animated movie. This is an animated movie that I feel like everybody loved. It did well. People watched it, right? It did pretty good at the box office. Everybody, critically wise, loved this film. And it's been 10 years. And there's nothing. Big Hero 6 is a great animated superhero movie about this boy whose brother dies, and he's kind of this genius inventor, and a bunch of stuff happens that leads him into this quest where he's a superhero doing superhero shit. There's a really interesting team around him. There's a lot of emotional character stuff in this movie, and altogether it's just a really great film that definitely leaves the door open for a sequel that was never made. Now, I've read stuff that the producers of this movie and the people that made it just have no interest in doing a sequel, and that Disney has no interest in doing one without them. So if nobody's interested in it, then it's not gonna happen, but I'm interested in it. So fuck you, make it happen. Come on, man, we need a movie like this. We need the sequel, come on. This is a great movie. I mean, who has seen this movie and doesn't want a sequel? I feel like this is an easy slam dunk. But as of now, this looks like one that's probably not gonna happen. What a shame. Next is a fourth Before movie. Now, the Before trilogy is made by Richard Linklater. It stars Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, and of course it is a film series about this couple where they meet in Before Sunrise, and they kind of spark this love, this relationship in Vienna, and then it continues in 2 other movies, and we just follow over the decades this relationship between these 2 people in these very, very unique movies that are essentially, all 3 of them, just 2 people, a day in their lives. We just follow them on a camera as they talk to each other, and that's it. But there's something about these movies that's so different than just about anything out there. They're so hypnotizing, they're so beautiful, and they make you feel as single as you could possibly. They're brutal to watch. They're brutal to watch.
Oh, look at us, we're in love and happy and not dead inside. Get fucked, both of you.
Now, this was, I don't think it was designed as a trilogy. If you watch Before Midnight, the last movie, it feels like this was meant to just be a continuation for as long as they can make the series. That we were just going to keep following up with these guys, like however, I know there's like a specific amount of years between each movie, but about every decade or so, we just follow up and peer into the life of this couple and kind of follow them up until when they're elderly and they're old. And I thought that would be, that was probably Linklater's idea, and Linklater, who is this very unique filmmaker who does weird shit like that. He's filmed Boyhood, he's filming another thing right now, which is something that's going to be filmed over the course of like 10 years. It's a very, very different, innovative filmmaker, and I think that was the idea with this trilogy, but they've kind of missed the timeline so far to make that fourth movie. Like, if they had followed the years between, we would have gotten the fourth movie already, and we haven't. I think the last thing I heard from it is that Richard Linklater actually presented the idea to the cast of the fourth movie. He presented a script or some sort of idea for what he wanted to do, and Julie Delpy kind of declined it. Apparently, she said that she thinks it's perfect as a trilogy and it doesn't need anything more. Whatever. But maybe one day she'll be convinced and they'll go back and they'll make a movie, even if it's 10, 15 years from now, because I do think this is a incomplete story, that there is more story to tell here with these characters, and I think these movies are so good, and they're probably pretty easy to make. Like, they're very simplistic movies when it comes to the filmmaking involved. Most of the weight of these movies is brought to you in the performances, so I would really like to see another one of these films, and I think we might get one eventually. How about a sequel to RoboCop? And yes, I know we got a bunch of sequels to RoboCop. We even got that really bad reboot, I believe, back in 2013, and that's not what I'm talking about. I do not want a sequel to those movies or a sequel to the reboot. What I want is a sequel like Halloween, like what we've seen a lot of other film franchises do, a sequel to the original RoboCop movie, because that is a fantastic sci-fi, weird, gothic, gritty thriller 80s, or I think it was 70s action movie. Like, it's just a great movie, and we don't have a lot of movies like RoboCop anymore. This is a movie that I think would work for modern audiences if you could somehow take that character, bring him to modern day, into our Hollywood, and sort of make a movie that visually sort of resonates what that movie did so well, and also understands the world and the story structure of RoboCop. We just got that RoboCop video game, which I was a big fan of. I played through the whole thing, and I enjoyed the hell out of it, and that's really what sparked this interest in wanting to see a RoboCop movie. If you can do what that game did in sort of, reinvigorating that style of storytelling, that world, those characters, and bring that into a modern film, you could really have something special. I think there is something there to make an interesting movie. I believe that Amazon has the rights for RoboCop, and that they might be developing something in that world, whether it's what I'm describing, a sequel to the original or a reboot, I have no idea. But apparently there will be some RoboCop thing coming soon. So, hooray! How about a couple James Gunny things? These movies he didn't direct, but he did produce. First one, Brayburn. Brayburn is a fantastic movie that nobody saw, nobody talks about, but goddamn, man, it should get a sequel. And it's not going to get a sequel because James Gunn's working at DC, and this movie was essentially James Gunn making a evil Superman child movie without calling him Superman or saying anything about DC. Brayburn is a movie about this kid who is essentially Clark Kent. He's a kid who is an alien who arrived on this farm, and these people have been raising him. He's got superpowers, and then he turns out to be a gigantic douchebag. And it's just a horror movie with him killing off a bunch of people and just doing crazy weird shit that a psychopath with Superman powers would probably do, especially if they were a kid who is a psychopath. And that's what this kid is. The movie's gritty, it's brutal, it is a little slow at times, which doesn't make it the best movie ever, but it's just a violent, gory take on the Superman story, and it's really solid. And it ends on a cliffhanger. And they talked about a sequel. And they never made a sequel! This is one I think a lot of people would love to see, especially in our modern day, where the best movies, superhero-wise, the movies that are doing best in the superhero genre at the moment, are movies that sort of subvert the expectations of superhero movies, that do something a little bit different. This was a movie that did something really different. I would love to see what they do next with it. One more James Gunn movie, we have the Belo Experiment. Who remembers the Belo Experiment? I think about this movie like every day. I love it. This is another like Battle Royale, Hunger Games type scenario movie, where you have a bunch of workers that work in this office. It's this very large office company, and they all go to work one day, and the building gets shut down, they get locked inside, and they get told pretty much, hey, you all gotta kill each other. It's a little more complex than that. There's a lot more layers. There's like a game that's played. You know, it's like, oh, you have to choose like 20 people to die, or like everybody's gonna have their heads blown off. Like, there's a bunch of crazy shit that happens, but that's the basic idea, is that there's like a bunch of people in this building, and one person gets to walk out. Simple story, right? Simple concept, but it really works. It has great characters, it has great music, it has awesome, awesome kills that are just gruesome. It's got some emotional stuff, this emotional idea of what does it mean to make the sacrifice to have to kill these people? Like, is killing these people for your own survival? Like, the morality of that? Like, it asks some pretty good questions. And then the movie very, very, very clearly teases a sequel. And I've been waiting. And I have waited so long.
I've waited years.
Will we get it? I don't know. Sean Gunn recently said that there's no plans for a sequel. And James Gunn being occupied at DC really signals that this is probably not going to happen. What a shame. Let's make the Belo Experiment 2. I'll make it. Hire me. I've never made a big movie before, but I'm passionate. I could see the title. We'll call it Joe Marchionne's The Belo Experiment. Or we'll take out the, right? The the's a big thing in Hollywood. Like The Batman, or just Batman, or The Superman is probably what they're going to call the next Superman movie. Probably not. I'm rambling, let's move on. About a Christopher Nolan movie. Now, I thought about a few of his movies that you could really talk about for sequels, but a lot of them feel outlandish, like they'll never happen, like A Dark Knight 4. It's not gonna happen. Would I like to see it? It would be cool. Jonathan Nolan's been talking about it, but that's not on the list. I did think about Inception 2, but I just love that movie so much, I feel like a sequel would probably ruin the ending of that. Maybe a sequel to Interstellar, not like a direct sequel, but something that maybe takes place like 100 years after the ending of Interstellar, I think could be cool. Also not gonna happen though, but here's one that I think could happen, and one that I'd be fascinated by. How about Tenant number 2? Let's get a sequel to Tenant. Tenant is one of Christopher Nolan's most hated movies. It's not his best. It's a movie that just did not work for a lot of people, but it was still widely received well by audiences and critics. It's a movie that I personally love, even if I can admit that it's one of his weaker films. The film is this crazy espionage movie. It's his version of James Bond. It is this movie that mixes espionage with the craziest time travel mechanic I've ever seen built into any story structure ever. The time travel in this movie is so complex and so intimidating that somebody thought of this, not only thought of it, but decided to write a plot around it and film action scenes around. It's insane. It is one of the craziest things in the world. It's super intimidating, but it works. When you fully understand what Tenet is and how it works, it makes sense, and it's almost mind-blowing how great it is. Some of the action sequences, like John David Washington fighting himself, going forward in time, and going back. What the fuck? It's absolutely insane. It's a great movie, and the movie does set up for what could be a sequel. It's a movie that clearly ends in a spot where it's like, we could continue and tell another story in this world, and I hope at some point, maybe not soon, but I hope at some point, Nolan goes back and is able to do it. Next up is Blade Runner 3. Now, this is one that's sort of happening, but not in the way that I wanted it to. Now, of course, we had the original Blade Runner, which is directed by Ridley Scott, which takes place in this incredible cyberpunk-y sci-fi universe starring Harrison Ford, where he plays a Blade Runner, a person who goes and kills these cybernetic AIs in this weird world. Then you had Denis Villeneuve, who made his sequel, Blade Runner 2049, which came out only a few years ago, and it is a masterpiece. It is a remarkable piece of work that is just so underrated, and nobody saw it. It bombed at the box office. It is an incredible movie, a movie that does set up a sequel, a movie that follows Ryan Gosling, who is a cybernetic AI, robot thing, and he is hunting these other cybernetic robots, and he kind of uncovers this weird mystery that maybe these AIs are not all that they seem. Maybe they have a soul. Maybe they were created by something more godlike and not just human creation. This leads us down a spiral of events that leads us to an incredible ending, with Jared Leto being the villain and still being out there and a bunch of other stuff set up. There was clearly meant to be a third movie, a trilogy ender that we never got and never will get, at least from Denis Villeneuve, because he said that he is not making more of these. He was upset at how bad the movie did, and he regretted even making the movie. What a shame. You made a masterpiece, Denis. Accept the fact that you made a great movie and just the studio dropped the ball with presenting it. We are getting a TV series. I believe it's called Blade Runner 2099. It might have actually already filmed. I don't know a ton about it, but we are sort of getting a spiritual follow-up in that universe that Ridley Scott is producing, so we'll see. But yet again, a Denis Villeneuve Blade Runner 3 would have been like the greatest thing ever. It sucks, but it is what it is. Next is District 9. This is a movie that I do also think is going to happen at some point. It's one of the movies on this list that I can almost guarantee is going to happen. This is another one that's also just kind of up to the filmmaker. It's going to happen whenever Neil Blomkamp actually wants to make the movie. Now, Neil Blomkamp at one point was one of the biggest name directors in Hollywood, one of the biggest up-and-coming directors when he made District 9, which is this extremely unique sort of documentary-style sci-fi, a little bit of horror, but really comedy, satirical comedy about this alien ship that comes down to Earth, and humans just have to deal with the fact that these aliens are here, and they're kind of annoying. Now, the film takes a lot of twists and turns besides that, and it is a really unique and engaging movie, a movie that definitely deserves a sequel that was set up in this film. Neil Blomkamp has talked about a sequel for years, that he has ideas for it, that he might have even had a script for it, and he just keeps pushing it back and pushing it back to make shitty movies like Chappie. Stop making Chappie! Stop making Need for Speed or whatever the hell you're making. Go and make this. This is what we need. We need District 9 or District 10 or District 11, whatever the hell they're going to call it. It's going to be a good movie, and this one I think is going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And then we have Dredd 2. Who here has seen Dredd? It is one of the best movies that nobody, and I mean nobody, talks about. This is a movie that was secretly directed by Alex Garland, the guy that made Ex Machina, and as recently he made Civil War. He is a phenomenal director. This is a script that he wrote, and he ghost directed the movie. It stars Carl Urban, and it takes place in this world where pretty much the police force are these people called judges. These dudes that have really cool outfits, really cool helmets, and they are law and order in this cyberpunky-like universe. And the whole film is just one gigantic action sequence where Carl Urban and his partner are sent out to this large tower that is ran by this gang leader who is Lena Headey, aka Cersei Lannister, and she is awesome in this film. She's scary, she's terrifying, she's badass, and this whole climb up this tower to get to her, all the action sequences, it is just a great early 2010s action movie, stuff that we don't really get anymore, stuff that I loved as a child that just makes me feel warm and nostalgic. Kind of reminds me of the original Resident Evil movie for some reason. It's a great film. And it needs a sequel. Like, a sequel to this movie would be so easy to make, and it would be a slam dunk. It's such a simple world, a simple concept, but it's cool. It looks cool. The action is gritty. It's violent. There were rumors that we might be getting a TV series for this at some point. I want a movie. I want, let's have Zack Snyder direct it with his slow-mo bullshit. It could be so cool. Dredd 2. Why not? Let's get it made. How about Edge of Tomorrow 2? Now, this one has been talked about for years and years and years. Now, Edge of Tomorrow is an incredible movie. It stars Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, and it is this Groundhog Day style movie about this alien war, this humans versus alien war, and Tom Cruise is living in this Groundhog Day scenario where he has to learn how to fight and how to defeat the aliens before this cycle of living and dying sort of runs out. It's a phenomenal movie. It is absolutely incredible, and it's a movie that doesn't really set up a sequel at all. It kind of concludes its story. It is a good standalone movie, but there have been just so much talks about how they have ideas for a sequel and how they want to do a sequel, and that Tom Cruise wants to do a sequel, and everybody wants to do a sequel. If you're gonna do it, just freaking do it at some point. I would be so down for this. Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt have such great chemistry together, and seeing them come back in an action alien movie would just be so cool, especially if they have a good way in, a good story, a good concept, a way to bring these aliens back and have it make sense, a way to do the Groundhog Day scenario again and make it make sense. Maybe bring in new characters, new actors. There's other ways to do this that could be interesting. Obviously, Tom Cruise signed a big deal with Warner Brothers where he's going to be producing movies for them, and apparently one of the rumors is that this is one of the movies Warner Brothers wants. They want Edge of Tomorrow 2. So this one kind of seems inevitable at this point, like it's gonna happen, and that is really exciting. I can't wait for it, and yeah, Edge of Tomorrow 2, let's go. This is probably the most likely one to happen I think we've talked about. And here's number one, and this is the one that's my personal pick, and it's one that it frustrates me that it hasn't been made. I'm talking about National Treasure 3. Listen, I'm a huge fan of National Treasures 1 and 2. I think they are some of the best movies ever. They're so good. Treasure hunting movies that intertwined Nick Cage, who is so good in them, and history, American history and world history, and it brings them together and merges them in a fictional treasure hunt story. Both movies are incredible. The Book of Secrets, where you're finding the secret conspiracy book of the president and then going and finding El Dorado. The first movie is so great. You have corny villains like Ned Stark in the second one, I believe, or maybe he was the villain. He was the villain of one of them. Just such good stuff. They are such fun movies, and how, Disney, how have you not made the third movie in this trilogy? How? Everybody wants it. I've yet to see somebody who does not want a National Treasure 3. So what do? Disney goes, you know what? We'll give you National Treasure. We've been hearing the noise. And then they make this piece of garbage. This is what they give us.
Daddy, chill.
What the hell is even that?
And then you have Nick Cage screaming, please, let us do the trilogy. Let me make another National Treasure. And according to Nicolas Cage, Disney just doesn't have interest. They would rather make a bunch of garbage Star Wars movies and woke nonsense. That's all Disney wants. They do not want a National Treasure 3 because Disney is dumb. Bob Iger is an atrocious CEO. I mean, he's great at making money. Good for you. I guess that's his job. But this man is so disconnected from what his audiences actually want, which is why the company's film department is in the shit that it's in right now, where they just keep releasing bomb after bomb after bomb. They're so disconnected from reality, and this is a movie that that we need. This movie, I will say, has to happen at some point. If the day comes 50 years from now and Nick Cage is dead and everybody involved is dead and we don't have a third National Treasure, what a fucking shame. Treasure hunt movies are awesome. This is the best version of that kind of movie, I think, and Nick Cage is so brilliant, and he's at a very good spot in his career where almost everything he does, people are sitting down and watching because he's so great and so committed to the craft. Please, God, make this movie. I'll make it. We'll call it The National Treasure, a Joe Marchione movie. Fuck it. I really don't care who makes it. Let M. Night Shyamalan make it for all I care. Let frickin' Zack Snyder make it. Let's get slow-mo treasure hunting sequences. I got it. Denis Villeneuve, National Treasure. Just big, gigantic, wide shots of, like, I don't know, like El Dorado 2.0 or some weird... They find heaven. How about that? That's the video, guys. What movie sequels do you guys want to see? Let me know down below. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe for more. Turn on notifications to see everything when I make it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.